Heyo! I'm Miss Linnea Lark, and I'm back with another tutorial for my Pottery and Slip series. Today we'll be learning how to make slip drips on our pots. Here we go. First, we gotta throw. So I center my clay. Then I open it up and make sure to compress that base so it doesn't crack later. And then you gotta pull your walls. Remember, you want wet walls and a dry bottom so that your fingers can glide across that clay. Also remember to keep a volcano shape while you're throwing. So as you pull, you'll need to choke in the rim to keep that volcano shape. Be sure to use all that extra clay at the base too. That's where you'll really get your height from. Now that I've got a cylinder, I gotta form the walls with my handy rib. I love this rib because it's thin and sharp, which allows me to bend it easily to compress and round my walls. To form my walls, I press outward from the inside. I push those walls until they hit my outside rib, creating more bulbous walls. And then I choke the outside in the areas that I want to be tight and skinny. Once I've achieved my desired form, I use my rib to compress and smooth my walls. And then I cut off the top so I make sure that it's flat. This will ensure that I can later trim my piece with ease. I then finish out all my throwing by giving it a last wet trim at the base. I do this with a wooden knife. Once I'm done, I cut her off the wheel and put her on a board to dry out. Before I cut her though, I put water around the piece and then cut the base in two different directions. This layer of water helps me detach and hydroplane my piece off the wheel with clean, dry hands. Now that I've let my pot set up to leather hard, it's time to trim. I center the pot as well as I can by eye, and then I use both my hands to steady one fingernail as it marks the outside edge. By keeping my fingers super steady, I'll be able to mark the pot in areas that are wider than center, and it won't mark the areas that are more narrow than center. Once this mark is made, I place my left pointer finger on the left side of the mark and my right pointer finger on the right side of the mark, and then I use my two thumbs to find the middle of that mark. Once I find the middle, I carefully push the pot away from the middle, just a wee bit at a time. This should center my pot a little more. I do this again and again, making fresh marks until my pot's base is centered. Once it's all centered and my finger can ride the walls without detaching, I attach my pot to the wheel head with some extra clay. Notice that I'm using large lumps of clay today. That's because I want the wide shoulder to be firmly secure, not just the lip. It's a matter of physics, people. When trimming, the first thing I do is flatten or level out the sides. That means both the walls and the base. I want those flat. For this, I use my handy bamboo trimming tool with teeth. Yeah, those teeth are magic. They easily slice through hills and valleys, gouges and protruding chunks. They allow me to get even and consistent sides. Once my walls and base are smooth and level, I use my smooth trimming tool to eliminate all those teeth marks. Now I draw out where I want my foot on the base. And then I use my trimming tool to hollow out the inside of that ring, creating a raised foot and also eliminating as much extra clay and weight as I can. I want my pot to be light and graceful, not heavy and clunky. Make sure you tap your bottom often to feel how thick your clay is. Make sure you don't cut all the way through it. Now that I've got a nice clean and deep foot, I do the final smoothing and compressing with a rubber rib. Alright, now we've got a thrown, trimmed, and leather hard pot. It's time to add the slip drips. This is the fun part. First, we gotta load a syringe with some thick slip. I'll make sure to put a link of where I bought the syringes in the description below. If you watched my slip preparation video, you'll remember that we want our slip strained and on the thick side. If you haven't watched that video, I would pause this video and start with that one. There should be a link at the top right hand corner of your screen now. Alright, I've already got my slip strained. It should be very smooth still, but it has been sitting here for a week drying out. So I need to thin it out with some water and my immersion blender. When adding water, just do a little at a time because we want our slip kind of thick, but it does need to be thin enough to move through my funnel. So thick enough that it doesn't drip, thin enough that it will drip. I know, it's a little bit weird. You just gotta try it out to figure it out. Just remember, if you add too much water, your slip will be super runny and susceptible to gravity when you put it on your pot. So that means that all your slip will just like a river run down the walls of your piece. We want it thick enough that it kind of holds its shape. Once I get what I think is the right consistency, I pull out the syringe's plunger, place my small rubber funnel in the barrel, and then scoop some slip into my funnel. I like this funnel because it's rubber and I can squish slip through it. Kind of cool. I got mine for a few bucks at Michael's. I highly recommend it. Anyway, once the clay is in my funnel and just sitting there mocking me because it's so thick and won't go anywhere, I make sure the cap of my syringe is on and then tap, tap, tap my syringe onto the table, getting the slip to run down through it and into the syringe. Once my syringe is full, I wipe off my hands and syringe with a sponge and then load the plunger back into the barrel, and then I wrap up my slip so it can be stored and reused later. Okay, now it's time to get back on my wheel with my pot and slip loaded syringe. I center my pot on the wheel and then slowly move the wheel around while drawing a thick line of slip on the rim. At some point you might encounter what I call an air bubble explosion. That's some trapped air inside of that syringe, and at some point is gonna explode out. Bummer. If this happens to you, just wipe it up as best as you can and keep going. I'm assuming there's some wisdom to give you about how to tap your syringe in such a way that that air bubble doesn't occur. But alas, I don't know those handy tricks. So if any of you guys have a handy trick on how to not get an air bubble explosion, if you could leave that in the comments below this video, we would all very much appreciate it. Thank you. But in the meantime, when yours explodes, just wipe it up. You'll be fine. Hey, it just adds for more interesting drip marks, right? You can draw as many slip rings as you like. I decided to draw 3 rings. I wanted lots of drips, you know? Once you've got your rings drawn, gently tap your pot down onto the wheel head, creating those drips. Fill in any thin areas and tap again. You can even add more slip strategically in areas that you want to see more drips in. Once you're satisfied, set your pot aside until the slip firms up. And don't forget to sign your bottom. Now that everything's set up to leather hard, the final step is to smooth everything out. I use a sponge on my rim and a rubber tipped tool to reinforce the drips. As the drips dried, one area ripped a wee bit, so I used my rubber tipped tool to make it look intentional and smoother. I reinforce a lot of my drips with this tool, making sure the drips look smooth and round with deep shadows defining them. And here's the finished bisqueware. Drips on drips on drips. I had a lot of fun with this one and can't wait to do it again. Thanks for following along with me and happy day! I want you to have a happy day.